Could the rising Roman Republic, fresh from victories in Apulia, imagine one mountain pass bringing its legions to their knees without a blade drawn? Along Italy's spine, the jagged Samnite mountains cut through Roman roads like veins of conquest. South lie the Samnite highlands, north the Latin towns bound by the Via. Between them near Beneventum, a narrow defile waits the Caudine Forks. In the summer of 321 BC, during the Second Samnite War, consuls Titus Veturius Calvinus and Spurius Postumius Albinus led over 40,000 Romans into this terrain to relieve Lucy. Misled by false intelligence, they left the main road for a twisting gorge by ridges and sealed at both ends. While above, unseen, Gaius Pontius and his Samnites already controlled every exit. How could Rome's proud legions stumble into such a trap? What stratagem turned a shortcut into a prison? And why did their enemy choose humiliation over slaughter? Was this the Republic's darkest day, long hidden under later triumphs? In this episode, we lift the veil. Follow us into the mountain pass, where Roman confidence met Samnite cunning, and see how one march became a ritual of disgrace that reshaped an empire. By the opening decades of the 4th century BC, the Roman Republic had evolved from a regional Latin power into an ambitious state whose citizen armies were reshaping central Italy. Its political system, with annually elected consuls commanding forces raised from the census of free male citizens, allowed it to field 2 full consular legions, each campaigning season supported by allied contingents from Latin towns and colonies. Moving along a growing network of Roman roads, arteries of conquest and supply, such as the Via Appia, begun in 312 BC, these armies could strike deep into enemy territory, relieve allies, and impose treaties on defeated peoples. This mobility bred confidence, even audacity, in Rome's strategic thinking. To the south, however, the Samnite Confederation still held sway over the high country. This was not a single city-state to be stormed, but a loose league of 4 main tribes, the Herpini, Caudini, Caracini, and Pentri, spread across a mountainous belt running from the Anines toward the Adriatic. They had no great walls or capitals, but controlled high pastures, narrow passes, and a warrior culture trained from youth to fight in broken terrain. They could assemble large forces of spearmen and light infantry on short notice, and then melt back into their uplands. To them, Rome's encroachment into Campa and Apulia threatened the lifelines of their society. Gaius Pontius, son of the celebrated leader Hirinius, was well versed in both Roman habits and Samnite strengths. His father had fought Rome before. He himself had watched the Republic's rise and saw that a straightforward battle might be disastrous. He therefore turned to ruse and topography rather than open combat. The spark of the 321 BC campaign was Luceria, a fortified town in Apulia, whose allegiance Rome prized. Its loss would unravel Rome's hold on the Adriatic coast. Determined to save it, the Senate entrusted the year's 2 consuls, Titus Veturius Calvinus and Spurius Postumius Albinus, with full command. Together they mustered 2 consular armies, some 40,000 men with engineers, pack animals and camp followers, and marched south from Capua into Samnite country. This was Rome's boldest strategy yet, to thrust through enemy territory before the Samnites could concentrate, link up with Luceria, and cement Rome's presence on both coasts. The plan assumed Roman speed, discipline, and the safety of established roads. Pontius prepared a counterstroke. Through captured drovers and planted rumors, he convinced the consuls that the main Samnite army was far off in Apulia. The quickest route to Lucy, they were told, lay through a little used mountain track near Beneventum, known to locals as the Caudine Forks. The name came from the bifurcating valley where 2 narrow gorges joined, a natural choke point in the heart of Samnium. On maps, it looked like a shortcut. On the ground, it was a trap. While the Romans marched unsuspecting, Pontius blocked both mouths of the pass with felled timber, rockworks, and palisades, and stationed detachments on the cliffs above. When the head of the Roman column reached the far exit, it found it sealed. Turning back, the rear discovered the same. Samnite warriors now appeared on the ridges with javelins and stones, invisible but omnipresent. The legions had entered not a road, but a prison shaped by the Samnites themselves. This was the backdrop to Rome's humiliation at the Caudine Forks, a republic at the peak of its youthful confidence and a mountain people fighting for survival with cunning and terrain. It was the meeting of two strategies, one bold, one deceptive, that would produce not a battle, but a ritual of submission still remembered 2 millennia later. The Roman movement that ended in catastrophe began like any urgent relief march. From Capua, the consular armies swung southeast, pushing off the main arteries of the plains and aiming for the Adriatic coast. Their goal was Luceria, the fortified Adriatic town whose fall would have cut Rome's eastern communications and threatened its allies in Apulia. But time mattered. Pressed by the siege of Luceria, Titus Veturius Calvinus and Spurius Albinus chose a quicker, less obvious track. They left the comfort of the main road, threaded through local byways and shepherd tracks, and marched into the uplands between Capua and Beneventum with more than 40,000 men, their heavy baggage trains, pack animals, and engineers in tow. That decision is central to understanding how the Samnites won. Where the Roman army saw a shortcut from Capua toward Luceria, the Samnite commander Gaius Pontius saw an opportunity. Pontius had spent his life in the hills of Samnium. He knew every fold of those mountains, every unmarked ravine and shepherd's trail. He also understood Roman habits, the consul's eagerness to relieve an ally quickly, the legion's reliance on predictable lines of march, and the cumbersome vulnerability of a large force moving with wagons and dependent on local guides. With these insights, he would deception into geography. Pontius set the trap by manipulating what the Romans trusted information through captured drovers, planted rumors, and controlled sightings. The Samnites convinced the Roman commanders that the main enemy force was engaged elsewhere in Apulia and that the mountain track near Beneventum offered a safe and swift route to Luceria. Lured by this intelligence and confident in their speed, the consuls pressed on. The Roman columns therefore entered the Caudine Valley not as a hurried vanguard, but as a long, strung-out body. The front elements scouting ahead, the main legions marching in the middle, and the heavy baggage and slower allies forming a swollen rear. The whole formation was ideal for one who wished to close the exits. Pontius prepared both the land and the ambush meticulously. He blocked the two mouths of the defile that gives the place its name, the narrow forked gorge south of Beneventum, with felled trees, stacked boulders, and hastily constructed palisades turning the pass into a closed chamber. Smaller works and ditches masked the true closures so that the leading Roman troops reached the far exit and found it impassable. When they looked back, the rear was sealed as well. Samnite detachments hidden on the ridges and in shepherds' coves above the valley completed the enclosure. From those heights, they could hurl javelins and drop stones while remaining largely out of sight. The Caudine Forks, which had seemed merely a narrow shortcut on the march map, became a natural prison. The Romans tried to respond with what they knew best: force and formation. They attempted to clear the barricades, to lever away logs and build ramps, and to drive skirmishers up the slopes, but the terrain favored the defenders. The legions, burdened with packs and constrained by the gorge, could not deploy into cohesion. Cavalry was useless in the cramped valley, and engineers could do little against prepared obstacles while under constant harrying from above. The Samnite fighters used light infantry tactics, quick size, sudden volleys of javelins and stones, and relentless pressure on any Roman attempt to dig or break the palisades. The long wagons and baggage trains that had seemed the price of operational reach now became anchors, slowing every reaction and turning the column into an unwieldy target. Worse, the Romans discovered they had been denied the one resource the mountains could most fiercely withhold: water. Springs and streams were controlled or rendered inaccessible by the Samnites' placements, and the crowded column soon complained of thirst. Food, too, became problematic. The legions could not forage freely while hemmed in, and the camp followers amplified the strain on supplies. Hours stretched into days. Attempts to send messengers out to summon relief failed as Samnite scouts intercepted runners on the ridge tracks. From the high ground, Pontius could both observe and parry the Romans' every move. The tactical picture hardened. The consular armies were trapped in a defile between Capua and Luceria, cut off from their normal lines of communication and unable to force either mouth without catastrophic loss. Pontius's stratagem thus brought the Romans to a stark choice. He had not sought their slaughter so much as their capitulation under terms that would mark Rome's pride. By closing the exits, occupying the commanding heights, and reducing the trapped column to thirst and hunger, he turned operational success into moral leverage. In those days, the Samnites were masters of the element most useful to mountain war: patience. From their perches, they could watch the legions discipline fray, their officers argue, and their soldiers grow gaunt and demoralized. It is worth emphasizing why Roman reconnaissance failed here. The consuls' decision to deviate from the Via Appia into the lesser track, a decision driven by the urgency to save Luceria, meant they trusted hastily obtained local information over systematic scouting. The Roman practice of marching with cumbersome trains and relying on allied guides optimal in plains or established roads was the very weakness Pontius exploited in the Caudine ravine. In short, the Samnites turned Rome's operational advantages, numbers, discipline, mobility over roads against it by stripping away the conditions in which those advantages mattered. When the consuls finally grasped the full extent of their predicament, the trap was complete. A long column, its exits blotted out, watched in silence from the valley floor as Samnite standards fluttered on the heights. The stage was set not for a pitched battle, but for a negotiation that would imprint itself on Roman memory, a surrender performed not on a field of blood, but in the humiliation of the yoke. For the Romans inside the Caudine Forks, the first night felt like a pause, the second like a sentence. Day after day, the steep ridges above the valley glittered with Samnite spearheads, yet no attack came. Instead of charges or missile storms, Pontius used silence and blockade. By controlling every spring and pathway above the gorge, he denied the legions even a trickle of water. Pack animals collapsed in the dust. Soldiers rationed what little food remained. The heavy smell of unwashed bodies and dying mules drifted over the camp. Attempts to storm either exit were met by falling stones and javelins from above, and the narrowness of the gorge prevented the legions from deploying their usual manipule formations. Cavalry horses, tethered and useless, added to the confusion. Inside the Roman encampment, tension rose. Consuls Titus Veturius Calvinus and Spurius Postumius Albinus held councils of war in full view of exhausted centurions and shivering camp followers. Reports came back of messengers captured on the ridges and scouts cut off before reaching open ground. Even the engineers, Rome's pride in siegecraft, could do little to move massive boulders while under constant harassment. The soldiers dug makeshift wells, only to find them dry, or tried night sorties up goat paths, only to be driven back by Samnite outposts who knew every turn of the terrain between Beneventum and Lucy. Gaius Pontius, meanwhile, maintained his grip. Detachments rotated on the heights, some stationed near the western exit toward Beneventum, others above the eastern mouth leading to the Luceria road, so that the entire valley became a living net. He forbade his men from descending into the trap, understanding that hunger, thirst, and despair would do more than a frontal assault. Each day, Samnite heralds rode down to the barricades, not to fight, but to watch, while Roman morale ebbed. At last, with rations gone and morale collapsing, Pontius sent envoys with terms. He offered two choices: annihilation or release, under conditions designed to sting Roman pride. The Samnites could slaughter the entire force in the gorge, he warned, but preferred to send it home humbled. His proposal required the consuls to surrender their arms, strip their soldiers of armor, and pass every man from legionary to officer under a wooden yoke erected at the exit, a ritual older than Rome, symbolizing total submission. The Roman council debated fiercely. Some tribunes urged a breakout, even at the cost of heavy casualties. Others argued for accepting death rather than dishonor, but the arithmetic was pitiless. 40,000 men without water and food could not force mountain barricades manned by fresh troops. To save the army, the consuls agreed to Pontius's terms, signing an improvised treaty before the Samnite standards. They swore oaths on Rome's gods, pledging to abide by the agreement once back within their own borders. Thus, in the heart of Somnium, between the uplands of the Herpini and the road to Luceria, the boldest Roman march turned to paralysis. The legions who had left Capua, expecting relief and victory, now prepared for a humiliation they would carry into history: the passage under the yoke, the humiliation. On the morning appointed for the surrender, the Samnites cleared one mouth of the gorge and erected their symbol of victory. Two upright spears were driven into the soil of the narrow defile, and across them was lashed a third, forming a crude but unmistakable arch, the eugum, the yoke. In Samnite custom, this was more than a prop. It was an ancient, italic ritual that proclaimed that those who passed beneath it had been stripped of freedom and arms. Down in the Roman camp, the consuls moved through silent ranks. Standards were furled. Centurions oversaw the stacking of shields, swords, pila, and helmets into piles at the edge of the track. The sound of iron on stone echoed through the valley as legionaries, once the masters of Italy's plains, laid down their weapons in the dust of a mountain gorge. Horses were led away, armor removed, tunics left damp with sweat and shame. Even the fascals' authority was surrendered. At a signal from Pontius, the first cohort was ordered forward. Bareheaded and unarmed, the Roman soldiers shuffled toward the exit where Samnite warriors lined the slopes. Some spat, some jeered, some merely watched. Each man stooped to pass under the yoke, a movement that to Roman eyes symbolized bowing one's neck to slavery. Consuls Titus, Veturius, Calvinus, and Spurius Postumius Albinus walked at the head stripped of their insignia. Behind them came tribunes, then centurions, then the rank and file. More than 40,000 men moving in a single file through the arch of humiliation. Ammianis and later annalists likened the scene to a funeral procession. Shields glinting in the sun, only to be heaped in Samnite wagons. Standard silent soldiers, faces blank or wet with tears. Some muttered oaths of vengeance under their breath. Others hung their heads, staring at the dust of the path between Beneventum and Luceria, where their pride had been broken. The Samnites, disciplined as their commander, refrained from slaughter. They allowed the Romans to march out, disarmed and diminished along the track back toward Capua. Their rear guarded by Samnite detachments to ensure compliance. Back in Rome, the news caused uproar. Crowds lined the roads to see the returning legions, whispering at the sight of veterans who had once been invincible, now walking without shields or standards. Inside the Senate, fury and shame collided. Some demanded vengeance at once. Others argued that the treaty sworn by the consuls, however bitter, had to be honored to spare the Republic from dishonor. Spurius Postumius Albinus himself rose and offered to surrender his own body along with that of Titus, Veturius, Calvinus, and the senior tribunes back to Gaius Pontius as hostages, a symbolic act meant to release the Republic from the oaths made under duress. Envoys carried this offer south to Samno. Pontius, bound by his council, refused the gift. He had achieved his object without slaughter and would not taint the moral power of his victory with executions. For the Samnites, the outcome was a complete tactical success. With a single stratagem, they had captured 2 consular armies, forced Rome into a humiliating treaty, and secured breathing space for their mountain confederation. In the highlands around Caudine and Beneventum, the tribes celebrated the humiliation of their great rival. And for a moment, it seemed as if the Republic's advance into southern Italy had been stopped cold. Yet even Pontius sensed the precariousness of his triumph. He had struck at Rome's pride, but not at her capacity to recover. By sparing the legions, he allowed their thirst for revenge to ferment into policy. In the immediate years after 321 BC, the Second Samnite War entered a phase of maneuver and rebuilding. Rome withdrew to rearm, levy new troops, and harden its discipline. Military writers later noted that after Caudine Forks, the Senate tightened its control over reconnaissance, logistics, and the use of allied guides. Consuls were instructed never again to deviate from scouted routes without cavalry screens. And the practice of building fortified camps, even on the march, became more rigorous. Samnium, for its part, remained defiant but fragmented, its tribes jealous of each other and without a central fortress to rally behind. When hostilities resumed, the Republic moved methodically. By the 300s, 10 BC, Roman columns were again pushing into Apulia and Samnium, this time with a network of new roads and colonies anchoring their advance. The memory of the yoke hung over every march. Legions drilled with the shame of Caudine Forks in mind, determined never again to be trapped in a pass or deceived by false intelligence. In 316 BC, Rome repudiated the Caudine Treaty outright and resumed offensive operations, eventually capturing key Samnite strongholds and turning the Confederation's mountain strategy against itself. In the long view, the Caudine Forks became less a wound than a scar, a permanent lesson etched into Roman military culture. The incident was cited by later historians and statesmen as an example of how the Republic could absorb humiliation, reform, and return stronger. The passage under the yoke entered Latin idiom as a metaphor for disgrace and as a spur to vengeance. When Polybius and Livy wrote of it centuries later, they framed it not only as the most humiliating defeat of Rome, but also as the crucible in which Rome's resolve was hardened. For Gaius Pontius, the victory was brilliant, but fleeting. He had used deception and terrain to humble an adversary far larger than his confederation, but he had not crippled Rome's capacity for war. Within a generation, Samnium's mountain strongholds would be encircled by Roman roads and colonies. Its warriors would be defeated in open battle, and Pontius himself would be captured and executed. Yet his name would endure as the master of the Caudine stratagem, the commander who forced the legions under the yoke without spilling a river of blood. For Rome, the Valley of Caudine became a moral crucible. The shame of the yoke hardened the Republic's political will and military discipline. After Caudine Forks, consuls were expected to screen every march with cavalry scouts, to distrust shortcuts, and to fortify camps even on friendly ground. The Senate used the episode to justify a long war of attrition against the Samnites that would by 290 BC end in Rome's control of central and southern Italy. The ritual of humiliation thus became a springboard for conquest. Viewed more broadly, the Caudine Forks belong to a class of humiliations that reshape empires not by annihilation, but by exposing fatal weaknesses and forcing institutional reform. Unlike Marathon, a decisive battlefield defeat, that checked a Persian expedition and elevated the defender's identity, or the British retreat from Cable, a catastrophic rout with heavy loss and immediate political shock. Caudine's power was ritualized humiliation. Rome returned intact, yet shamed, prompted to tighten reconnaissance, logistics, and command discipline. In that sense, Caudine was not an end point, but a pivot, a painful lesson that redirected Roman ambition and helped harden the Republic for later conquest. And so as you trace your finger over the map of Samnium and imagine that narrow mountain pass between Capua and Luceria, remember that no swords needed to clash there for history to be made. A bold Roman strategy met a mountain people's cunning, and out of that collision came a ritual of humiliation whose echo still sounds 2 millennia later. This is the kind of story we tell at Great History English, where the stones of ancient roads and the clash of forgotten battles rise again before our eyes. Stay with us as we follow Rome from the shadow of the yoke to the heights of empire and uncover the next turning point where defeat became destiny.